to make this presentation interactive. So please feel free to stop me and ask questions. I'll answer the questions that I can. I'm going to ask you guys some questions to make sure that we're talking about things that are relevant to you and your businesses. So feel free to make it interactive. As Lisa said, I am the program director with the Center for Cooperatives in the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences at Ohio State. We're based at the OSU South Centers. If you're familiar with the South Centers, we're in Piketon, Ohio. My colleagues are here in the back, also representing a number of programs that we have to assist small businesses through their development. My team focuses particularly on Hi, I'm Hannah, just for the sake of the recording. So our team focuses particularly on cooperative and collaborative enterprises. So groups of people coming together to do business in a group structure. So our mission really is to extend knowledge and technical assistance to emerging and existing cooperatives through the integration of teaching, applied research, and outreach work. And as Lisa shared, I have a background I have a law degree from the University of Cincinnati. And a part of that business development work that we are trying to build is building in legal education and outreach. We have any other attorneys in the room? Okay, right? No, I'm kidding. So we're gonna jump into legal concepts that underlie pieces of branding and marketing. I have to use this one, right? This is just a plug. If you're not familiar with the OSU South Centers, please do visit us at the back table. We'd love to talk about the programs that we offer in business development. We also have programs in aquaculture, horticulture, soil, water, and bioenergy. And you can learn more at southcenters.osu.edu. To make sure I'm pointing at the right place here. Here's my disclaimer. This is important. We're talking here for educational purposes only today. This isn't legal advice. It's not a substitute for legal advice that you might need for your business. We do always encourage folks to talk with an attorney, talk with an accountant, get that support team that you need for your business built around your business. Because there are going to be things that you don't know, right? As entrepreneurs, we can't be experts in everything. So build that team of experts around you who can help you address those things that maybe you don't know. So this is my disclaimer, but also a gentle encouragement, right? So here's our plan for today. We're going to talk about a couple of legal concepts that underlay large pieces of branding and marketing consideration. We're not going to talk about everything. We can't do that in 45 minutes. We're not going to talk about, for example, regulation that might impact claims that you make around marketing. So for example, if you make health-related claims, that's likely to be regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. We're not going to get into that. We're not going to get into international issues. We're not going to get into warranty issues and other things that might impact marketing. We're going to focus specifically on copyright and trademark, and particularly around digital marketing strategies. And we'll have an opportunity to learn more about those. Again, it's a basic introduction. This is a complex area, and we're not going to be able to go through everything. But I hope that this basic introduction can help everybody as they're working on their digital marketing strategies, just keep a few key pieces of information in mind. So let's get started into the interactive section. What's property? I have this picture up here. Are there things in this picture that are property? Seeing some heads. What are they? Heads shaking. The car is property. Sure. What else? The house is property. What else? The photo is property. Somebody read my title. Good job. Anything else? What makes those things property? Why are you telling me that they're property? Someone owns them. What does that mean, that someone owns them? Sorry, I'm getting. They have rights to them. Yeah. Yeah. So, for example, these pieces of property, when we think about what property is and we think about what ownership means, we're thinking about rights that go along with those things, right? So, in particular, with property, we're thinking about rights like the right to exclude people from using it, If that's not my car and I just went up and hopped in and drove away, what would happen? I'd probably get in trouble, right? Because I don't have a right to use that car. The owner has excluded me from that right. The owner has a right to use the car, so property use is another one of those bundle of rights that goes along with property. Things, the right of transfer, right? When you own something, you can sell it. When you own something, you can partition it. So we can take those rights and separate them. Does that make sense? What about, oh, wrong way. What about that? Does everybody recognize that thing? Yeah. Is that property? Absolutely, I'm hearing yes, absolutely. Right, similar concepts, right? This is property and it's actually quite valuable property, right? The fact that we all recognize it, it has a lot of power, it's quite valuable. The owner of that property can keep other people from using it. They have an exclusive right to use it, right? These pieces of property, this in particular, does anybody know what kind of property this is called?
The licensed property.
It is licensed, if you have permission to use it. A license is the term that we use to say you are granted permission to use it. The little R there at the bottom tells me that it's trademarked. It's a registered trademark. So we're going to talk a little bit more about copyright and trademark specifically as two types of really important intellectual property. Intellectual property is sometimes different. It is property, but it can be different from that car and that house because it's intangible, right? It's not something that we can put on this table and then pick back up, right? It kind of exists in that digital space, right, that we were talking about. So intellectual property is property, and it can be an important part of digital marketing strategies. So that's what we're going to talk about. An estimated 91% of small businesses allocated resources to digital marketing in 2021. How many of you are small business owners? Yeah. What digital marketing strategies are you using? If you don't mind sharing. Just shout them out. Facebook. Yeah. Facebook is an important digital marketing strategy as social media, right? Other forms of social media, they're always changing, right? Sometimes it's hard to keep up. Does anybody feel like that? Hard to keep up with the right social media platform, right? Social media is a really important digital marketing strategy. What else? Does anybody have a website? Yeah? Oh yeah, I forgot that one. Yeah. Does anybody email their customers? Yeah, I'm seeing over here, yeah. Email is a really important digital marketing strategy. It can be. So we see that many small businesses are allocating resources to digital marketing. In 2017, there was a survey of over 3,000 customers in multiple countries across the globe. 35% of those customers reported that they go to social media for information when they're considering making a purchase. Right? Let that sink in. 35% of customers are going to social media when they're thinking about buying something. If you segment that audience and you look at just 18 to 34-year-olds, does anybody want to guess where that percentage is? 75. It's not quite that high, but it's 50%. Or 50% of 18 to 34-year-olds are going to social media when they're making purchasing decisions, right? Over 90% of customers in one study reported that video influences their buying decisions, right? Think about how you make buying decisions. Do you like seeing videos of products? It can be helpful, right? Lots of people are visual, absolutely, absolutely. And social media can be really powerful for small businesses, right? Social media can help you reach really large audiences, maybe even across a broad geography than what you can reach in other platforms. But all of those platforms, those digital strategies, mean that your small business is likely using intellectual property, using or generating intellectual property, right? Because what does it take to use those strategies? It takes video, it takes pictures, it takes content, right? So the reason that I want to talk about this today is because And the reason that small businesses should care about this is because, one, your business is probably creating intellectual property. Maybe you're not even realizing it. You're probably creating that property as you're taking pictures, as you're posting, as you're building a website. You should think about, and it can be beneficial to think about, how can you protect that? Or at least just be aware that you're creating it. Number two, if you're not creating it, but you're using intellectual property, you're using photos, you're using videos, there's some implications there, right? You want to make sure that you're not infringing on someone else's property. You're not using something that isn't yours. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's jump in and talk about copyright. This is the fun stuff, right? Some of the legal phrasing. So copyright law comes from a federal statute. A copyright protects, and I'm going to use very specific words here, original works of authorship fixed in a tangible medium of expression. Okay, so the original work of authorship is a really important phrase there. It means that copyright protects certain output, certain content that have a creative element, right? And an element of originality. So these are things like websites, pictures, music, videos, sales presentation, could be reports that you generate for customers, software is copyrightable. These are works that have some element of originality and creativity. When something is protected by copyright, if it is a copyrightable material, what does that mean? What protections does it have? That means the owner of that copyright has legal rights to reproduce that work. They have rights to distribute that work. They have rights to display or perform it. And they have rights to develop derivative works, okay? So that means that the owner of that copyrighted work, very similar to that car and house we were talking about, right? They have property rights in that piece of work. So when they own that piece of art, for example, or they own that photo, it means that they have the rights to decide where it's distributed, the rights to distribute it. They have the rights to make copies of it, to sell it. Okay, does that make sense? Questions about that? Okay. So how is copyright protection created? Let's say you're working on a presentation and you want to make that presentation visually interesting and you need a graphic, right? Maybe much like the one that's up there. Okay, how do you know if this graphic is protected by copyright? How do I know if I can use that graphic if I'm not the person who created it? Sometimes on certain pieces, you'll see a little C in a circle. Does everybody know what I'm talking about? The little C in the circle? Does anybody ever, this is a different gripe, but does anybody ever type in Microsoft and put parentheses around a C and it just automatically does that? Yeah, and you're like, I wasn't talking about a copyright, stop doing that, right? So how can I know, does this picture have a little C? Does anybody see that? It doesn't, no, it doesn't. Does that mean that it's not protected by copyright? No, okay, so in order for something to be protectable by copyright, there's actually no action required for it to be a copyrightable material and for it to be protected by copyright law. So because this thing doesn't have a little C, doesn't mean that it's just fair game, right? I can't just go using it. I didn't create it. So the fact that I didn't create this, and it is likely protected by copyright because it is an original work, the graphic, it's an image, right? Copyright law attaches, copyright protection attaches simply when it's created and it's copyrightable material. So when there's that original expression fixed in a tangible medium that meets the definition of copyrightable material, it has protection. So when I'm working with this, you guys are thinking like, wait a minute, you just told me that this is probably protected. You didn't create it, but it's in your PowerPoint. What are you doing? right? So how do you use something that is likely protected, but you didn't create it? You cite that you didn't create it. That's a good strategy, but it actually doesn't protect you from infringing on somebody else's property. Not the only thing. So credit, again, attribution, credit, citation, that's a good thing, but it's actually not enough to say, oops, no, I didn't infringe on that person's property right. Permission, right? So having permission to utilize something. So this graphic actually came from a website that specializes in providing imagery, graphics, content that is licensed, excuse me, that is licensed for both commercial and non-commercial purposes, and that doesn't require attribution. So it came from a website specifically where I went to look for images that I could utilize in this presentation that had an open license. That meant that I could utilize them without being the owner of them. Has anybody heard of websites like this? So there are websites out there that that's what they specialize in. So I don't mean just a Google image search. That's not what I'm talking about, right? Where you search for an image and Google brings you up image results, right? And you just click on one and use that. That doesn't mean, because it came back in a Google image search, that doesn't mean that it's openly licensed, that I have permission to use it. I'm talking about websites like, for example, Pixabay is one that is licensed graphic material. That's a free version. There are other versions that are paid. Sometimes the graphics are different, right? So for example, if you've ever heard of Shutterstock or Getty Images, right? Those are services where you can pay to utilize. Has anybody ever used Canva? Yeah, I'm seeing some heads. Yeah, so Canva has a free version and a paid version, and the imagery on there is open. It's licensed to be used through that platform. So those online sources can be important opportunities if you're not generating the content, right? If you're not taking the picture, if you're not making the graphic, understanding where you can access those graphics, those images that you can utilize through those open licenses can be really helpful. Who owns a copyright? So let's think about, there's a copyrightable work created. It's a picture, right? Let's say I take a picture. The person who owns the rights in that piece of material is actually the author or authors. And what that means in this context is the creator, right? So the creator of the work is the holder of the rights in that work. That's pretty simple, right? Yeah, makes sense. If I take the picture, I'm the one who creates it. If I make a presentation, I'm the one who creates it. This presentation, though, I've created as an employee of Ohio State University. Do I own this or do they? The university. Okay, so there's a doctrine under copyright law called work made for hire. In general, this is in general, right? It doesn't cover every topic, and this can be a complex area, but in general, an employee who creates copyrightable material in the scope of their employment, that material is owned by the employer. Okay, so that's an important piece to understand if you have employees or you're going to have employees soon who will be creating works or who will be generating content. But what happens if someone who's not an employee creates a work for your business? So what if, for example, you say, I don't have the skill set to do those graphic pieces that I would love to do for my logo, or to do the design work that I need to do. And an independent contractor is able to do those, or another business is able to do those. That's where it can get a little bit tricky, right? Or a little bit different. So in general, when work is done by an independent contractor, If there's not a writing that says that the person hiring or the company hiring that independent contractor or other business will own the work that they create, that ownership stays with that independent contractor or that business. Okay, that's an important point to consider because more and more businesses are utilizing third parties to do their social media management, right? Or to do their content design or to generate some form of content. So it can be important to understand who's going to own that content. Because if we go back to the rights that are created in that content, the right to reproduce, the right to distribute, the right to develop derivative works, right? If that arrangement you don't understand or have in writing that the work that comes from that, those rights are with you, the person paying for them, then you might have a right to only that single copy that you paid for. And then what if you want to make copies of it, or what if you want to use it, you intended to use it on your website, but then you want to use it elsewhere, right? Or you want to make, you want to do something different with it. So for that reason, it can be important to think through those ownership implications if you're working with a third party who's not an employee. Does that make sense? What questions are there? Okay, so let's think about some examples. So let's say your business creates a video. The holidays are coming up. How many of you have started thinking about marketing for the holidays? Hopefully a number. I'm seeing some grudgingly, like yes, right? Yeah, right. Yes. So if you're already thinking about this, so let's say your business creates a video and you want to use it on your website, and it's going to promote your new products for the holiday season, or maybe some sales and promotions that you have coming up for the holiday season. And you want to add All I Want for Christmas, the Mariah Carey song. You guys know what I'm talking about? Hopefully that is actually, according to Billboard, the #1 most popular holiday song of all time. Fun fact, right? You want to put that as overlay music. Cool? No, yeah, see, no, right? Someone else created that. It's a piece of music that's protectable by copyright. It is likely protected by copyright. We know that copyright law attaches when it's created, but it can also be protected in other ways. Okay, so I'm seeing the right answer. Probably not, right? Even if you credit, even if you say, this is All I Want for Christmas by Mariah Carey, right? If you haven't paid a license for that, probably not usable. Okay, but what if you use like 5 seconds? What if you use like 7 seconds? I assume you still have to pay for it. That's yes, good assumption. Yeah. No. Okay, that is still protected by copyright, even that 5 seconds, that 7 seconds. Okay, great. Let's think about social media. How many of you are on social media for your business? Yeah, okay. So let's say you run, this is just me coming up with an example. Let's say you run a store where you design and screen print clothing products, and you're the creator of those designs on that clothing, right? And a customer that your business follows on social, maybe it's a customer you have a great relationship with, takes a great photo of themselves in one of your products. Awesome, right? And they share it on their social media and put it out there for the world to see. You would like to utilize that photo. Maybe you want to put it on your business's social, or maybe you want to put it on your business's website. Cool? No. You guys are not falling for it. Yeah? Why? You didn't ask for permission and you didn't take the photo, right? So if you didn't take the photo, somebody else took it, right? And they likely have rights in that photo. They likely have copyright in that photo. Okay, so how might you go about being able to utilize that? What about a photo release form? So that's often used for people in a photo. Not necessarily the folks who take the photo, but I think maybe what you're talking about is get permission from the person who took the photo. Yes. What's that?
You put a caption on it.
You can put a caption on it, right? But somebody else took that photo. But again, remember that sometimes just putting a credit is not the same thing as getting permission. Okay. So maybe it's a direct message to that customer about utilizing that photo, right?
You should pay for
A paper trail, yeah, yeah. Something that's in writing, yeah. Okay, so I gave this presentation actually a couple of nights ago at another program, and something the folks in that room were much more interested in the music example that I gave here, right? Is anybody on TikTok or use Instagram Reels? Yeah, so let's think about, there are these platforms that utilize video, and video we know is a powerful marketing tool. Remember I mentioned that 90% of customers report that videos influence their buying decisions. And these platforms allow for pretty easy content creation of videos with graphic elements and music overlays, etc. So another disclaimer, I'm not an expert in TikTok. I'm not on TikTok. My best friend is like, you have to tell people when you're presenting on this that you're not on TikTok. It's just something you have to do, right? But my understanding from the research that I have done is, let's take TikTok for example. That platform actually has created a music library where they have music that they have secured the licenses to that allow their users to utilize that music royalty-free, right? So that is the permission that's required to not violate those rights in that music. My understanding is that on TikTok particularly, there's a commercial music library specifically for businesses and content creators, that those licenses are for commercial purposes. So just keep in mind that if you're not utilizing the sounds and the content within those libraries, and even if you are, there can be some complexities. So remember that we're talking in general, right? But if you're not, understand that if you're utilizing content, for example, music, that is protected by copyright, you don't have the proper permissions, right? That it can be taken down, and it could also be subject to action by the owner saying you've infringed my copyright, right? So TikTok has anybody, when you sign up for social media, you guys remember clicking a thing that said, yep, I read the terms and the user agreement, and remember it? How many read it? Okay, let's skip that part, right? Right. So I actually looked up, as I was creating this presentation, I looked up, again, let's use TikTok as an example, but other platforms have this, their intellectual property policy. So TikTok, I'm just going to read you that policy. TikTok respects the intellectual property rights of others, and we expect you to do the same. TikTok's terms of service and community guidelines do not allow posting, sharing, or sending any content that violates or infringes someone else's copyright, trademarks, or other intellectual property rights. Okay, so just understand as you're working with content in these platforms, if you're not utilizing from the library that of royalty-free music, even understand that there can be some complexity if you are utilizing that you need to have the proper permissions when you're posting those materials.
I think I'm sorry, because I just feel like I'm even though it's two different platforms, if I leave my TikTok logo on there and I put it on Instagram Reels, am I good? Or I need to separate them and use what Instagram is.
You know, that's a good question that I don't know the answer to. I'm just gonna be honest and say, I don't know the answer to that. I've not gone that deep of a dive. I'd like to do more research and understanding in order to be able to speak to that. But really good question, thank you. Okay, so let's think about, there's another really powerful, form of intellectual property that underlies pieces of marketing and branding. So if I ask you, just shout out to describe the logo for McDonald's. Can you tell me what that logo looks like? The golden arches, right? It's those two, kind of like French fries almost, right? In that stylized M. What if I say, describe the logo for Coca-Cola? There's a red comes to mind, absolutely. What else? The polar bears, yeah, that's an image. That fancy, really highly stylized cursive writing that says Coca-Cola, right? Yeah. What about Ford, the auto manufacturer? Blue. There's a blue oval. Yeah, it's a blue oval with this really kind of cursive writing that says Ford in white, and it has an outline in white around it, right? So the fact that I can say a company and you guys can describe a logo, what does that tell us?
They branded it well.
They branded it really well, absolutely, right? So there's a really important connection between that company and that logo, right? It's a really important piece of value for their company. It's a really important marker for their company, right? Those pieces are all examples, and we'll talk about a few more examples of trademarks. So a trademark is any word or phrase, name, symbol, sound, or design that identifies and distinguishes one company's products from those of another company, or those sold or made by others. So that the key requirement here is that connection between that word, phrase, name, symbol, and that company, right? When I said the company's name, you told me what the symbol was. So there's a really important connection there. Almost anything can be a trademark if it indicates the source of the goods and services. So, for example, words, the actual word, I pulled these examples from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Excuse me. The words Coca-Cola are a trademark. The word Twitter is a trademark. We can also think about slogan. If I say, America runs on Dunkin', you guys know the company I'm talking about? Yeah. What about it's finger licking good? Yeah, you know the company I'm talking about. Those are examples of slogans that are trademarked. Even things like trade dress can be trademarked because there's a connection, right? So if I describe to you the old-fashioned glass bottle that Coca-Cola uses, that kind of pear-shaped design, right? You can picture that in your head. That's an example of trade dress that is protectable by trademark, okay? So trademarks are another tool, another piece of intellectual property that can be protected, that protects exclusive use of those marks by those companies and creates protection against marks that might cause harm to those. Trademarks are different than trade names. So a trade name is a business's formal name that identifies the company as a whole, right? So this is the name that the company is called. It's probably, in general, it's acquired through business incorporation, or if a business is unincorporated, maybe a doing business as filing, the state agency that records these, or is the agency that creates business incorporations or recognizes business incorporation. While a trade name can be an important trademark, just doing this filing is not creating a trademark. It's simply registering a trade name or incorporating a business. Those are two distinct things. A certification mark is something that's used by certifying organizations to show that a product or a service has met its standards, right? It might be that there's geographic standards, it might be that there's quality standards, or various others. And while the marks are typically trademarked by the issuing organization, even though they don't generally use them themselves, they're licensed. The people who meet those standards generally are licensed to use that mark on their products. So for example, has anybody seen the Fair Trade mark? Yeah, that's an example of a certification mark. The entity that holds that is Fair Trade USA. The non-GMO verified mark, that little, I think it's a square, right? That's an example of a certification mark. It's used to signify something about that product, but it's a different thing. Okay. So if we think about trademark, how trademark protection is created or how a trademark is created, it's really created first by selecting a mark that's not already in use by someone else, right? It's not something that it can't be already being used. And then utilizing it in business in a way that creates that connection, that meaning. That can create a trademark that has protections. Remember those protections we were talking about, keeping other people from using it. So I showed you way at the beginning of the presentation, a mark that had a little in a circle. Okay, that mark meant that that was federally registered, but that registration is not generally necessary in order for there to be protections around that mark. Okay, in order to create protection, in some cases that can come simply from use in business of a mark that's not already used. Now, there are lots and lots of complexities around this. There are lots and lots of complexities around both of these topics. And again, we're just talking about a basic introduction. I mentioned on the prior slide that many things can be trademarked, but not necessarily everything can be trademarked. So, for example, slogans, words, symbols that are immoral are not eligible for trademark protection. So that's just an example. Things that are generic terms, generally not trademarkable. So, for example, a geographic term, it's simply a geographic indicator, something that's descriptive like that, and all it is descriptive, is not generally trademarkable, right? So there are questions. It's important to understand those complexities, but the important piece here that I would like to leave you with is that when something is protected by trademark, that means someone else owns that and has rights to it. Okay, registration. So as I'm mentioning, trademark protection can, in certain instances, be created through use in business and creating that association between the mark and the company. But registration can create additional rights. So for example, if a trademark is registered, then that can be noticed to everyone that, hey, this one's taken, right? This trademark is already in use. So how might that apply to small business marketing and branding? Well, for example, for startups, if startups are considering developing a business brand and even a name, it might be helpful to understand if that's close to an already existing trademark, right? Is that, are there trademarks that the small business should be aware of so that they're not mistakenly infringing on the marks of another company? And registered trademarks are searchable and at both the federal and the state level. So they can be registered federally with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and they can be registered with the Ohio Secretary of State. And both of those are searchable. And there are, of course, complexities with making sure that search works in the way that you want it to and captures everything you want it to. So expertise in that may be advisable. And for existing businesses, just like we were talking about with copyright, if a business is creating this material, understanding when it's being created and how it's being protected, if it is a significant source of value for the business, might be an important piece of understanding the implications for marketing and branding. So with that, really just understanding, the key points here are that if you're using photos, videos, graphic, music in your online presence, in your digital marketing strategies, considering ownership when using those. If those are not yours, do you have the right permissions to be able to use them? If you're creating that content, if you are actually making those designs, or you're taking those photos, or you're developing a brand, understanding those issues as you develop that content could be helpful. And if you're working with other people, right? If you're working with employees or you're working with third parties, independent contractors, other businesses, considering ownership as a part of that could be really important for understanding how that content can be utilized in the future. And of course, always contacting a knowledgeable attorney with questions, building that team of advisors around you can be really important. So with that, I'd like to stop, see if there's any final questions. And I think I'm what's holding you back from lunch, which is never the place you want to be in a program. So we can wrap it up. Questions? Okay. Please feel free to chat with my colleagues and I around the business development services that we provide in the region. We're happy to talk about it. We're happy to be here. Thanks so much, Lisa, for inviting us, and enjoy lunch and connecting with one another.
All right, thank you, Hannah. Lunch is being put out right now,